it's Chari here, and today I'm going to make this distressed sunset background with silhouette stamps over top. I'm going to be using the Lucky Star stamp set along with Winter in the Park, and I'm going to be using this distressed watercolor cardstock to create my backgrounds on. I really like using this cardstock. The ink really moves around very well on it, and it's already cut to the size of a standard A2 card. The first thing I need to do is protect my work surface here, so I'm going to lay down my nonstick craft sheet. This will protect my work surface from ink and allow me to kind of make a mess all over it and pull the ink from off the page onto the paper, as you'll see. Now the color scheme I've picked here, I actually borrowed from Christina Warner. She used this on a card and it used some colors I hadn't thought of using in the past. So I've got Antique Linen, Victorian Velvet, Seedless Preserves, Chipped Sapphire, and the Black Soot, which I never really considered using the Antique Linen in kind of a sunset before, or using the Black Soot to kind of top it off with a very dark color. And I don't use my Victorian Velvet very much either. I'm going to speed up the process here so you can see me do this whole background but in super speed. So I'm starting off with the Antique Linen. This is going to be the very bottom. I'm going to go higher up from the bottom than I will at the top, but that's just because I'm going to put a piece of black cardstock that's going to be the ground, so it's going to cover up part of that Antique Linen at the bottom. Then I went in with the Victorian Velvet right above it. And then after I did my Victorian Velvet, I decided to start at the top, and I went in with the Chipped Sapphire. Came pretty far down with that because I'm going to put black on the very top. And then I'm going in with my Seedless Preserves, and I'm just going to go back and forth between them all, blending where the two colors meet till I get it just the way I want it. I'm adding a little of that Black Soot at the very top just for that really dark color. And then you'll see I go back and forth between the colors to make sure that it's blended the way I want and I don't have any harsh lines between all my colors. Now that I've got my colors on the background cardstock, I'm going to set it aside so it can dry, and I'm using the sentiment that says I think my lucky stars for you from the Lucky Star stamp set. I have a piece of black cardstock here that I cut with one of the stitched rectangle dies. And the reason I did this is because I wanted a straight line for kind of my ground, but I like the stitching detail, and since all the stitching borders, the hillside borders, are all curved, that didn't really work for my images that I'm going to use, so I just cut one of the rectangles. It's a little wider than my background, and I'm just going to trim off the edges, but you'll see here in a minute how I do that. So I've used my powder tool and put it on that black cardstock, and I'm going to ink up my sentiment with some Versamark ink, which is a sticky clear ink. I'm going to center it up kind of close to the edge here. I'm just going to stamp that down, and then I can cover that ink with my white embossing powder here. So I'll have a nice bright white embossed sentiment at the very bottom of my card. Once I get that embossing powder on there, I'll heat it with my heat tool and melt that embossing powder so it's nice and bright white. Once that's all melted and I've let it cool a little bit, you can see that the powder is still on there from the embossing powder tool. So one little trick I like to do is to take a baby wipe and kind of wipe that white powder off. Just kind of moisten the cardstock and it'll take it off. Now this baby wipe is actually not very wet at all, so it just takes that powder off. I'm going to trim my piece down. I'm trimming it to where it's 1 inch wide. So now I've got that stitching detail. I know it's really hard to see on the camera here. It's along the top and the two edges, but the two edges are going to get cut off because it's slightly wider than my card base here. So I believe this rectangle is 4.5 inches long, and I need it to be 4 1/4. So I'm going to get my paper trimmer out here, and I'm just going to trim off 1/8 of an inch off each side so that it will be the right width. And actually that 1/8 of an inch falls right on that little stitching line, so it'll cut it right off. Now that that piece of cardstock for the ground is cut properly, I'm going to take it and line it up with the bottom of my background here, and I actually moved it just slightly down, and then I drew a very, very light pencil line, which you can't even see here on the camera, and this is going to be my guide. The reason I moved it slightly down is so that I don't have to worry about erasing it. It'll be covered up by the cardstock. Now I've mounted the little bench stamp from Winter in the Park on the acrylic block here, and I'm going to stamp that silhouette on the background. I'm using VersaFine ink. This is a oil-based ink, but it leaves a really nice crisp black image, and it doesn't absorb in the paper as much as Memento, Tuxedo Black, or water-based inks do. So I'm going to line it up. You can't see the line, but I'm lining it up to where those back feet of the bench are on the line, so those front feet are going to fall behind my ground line there, my black piece that goes on the bottom. Now I'm doing the same with the lamppost. I'm just going to ink that up, and I want the lamppost to look like it's kind of sitting behind the bench. So I'm lining up the bottom with the pencil line that you can't really see, and I'm just going to stamp that down. Because I did my distress on the textured side of the cardstock, I want to make sure I give some really nice even pressure so that I get a good impression and I don't get any voids in my stamp. Now I'm just going to use some liquid glue and adhere down that black piece of cardstock that becomes my ground line. And I'm just going to line it up with the edges, and it's going to cover up the very bottoms of my stamped images. So now those black silhouette images look like they're sitting on the ground. So I've got a standard size card base here that's top folding, and I'm going to put my distressed ink panel onto my card base. And I like to make sure that I have adhesive on all 4 edges, and I do lines all the way down the middle. And then when I am taking a piece like this that's the exact same size as my card base, I like to make sure I line it up with the top where the fold is. Because if for some reason my card base isn't quite cut right, I can always trim off the extra white on the bottom, but you can't do that on the top where the fold is. So I've got a gold gel pen here, and I'm just going to go in with it and draw a little tiny dot, kind of like a candle flame in my lamppost here. And then I've got my white gel pen, and I'm adding some little dots in the sky like stars. They're really hard to see, and it turns out that my white gel pen I think might be on its last leg. So I actually went back over with a silver gel pen, and you can see them really well, a lot better than you could with the white, and they have a nice silver shimmer to them as well, which is kind of nice. So I really like the silver better. So that's the finished card. I love this sunset look. So here's a close-up of that distressed background. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.